Welcome to the Jennifer J. Hammond Podcast. Jennifer is a licensed realtor, educator, speaker, and best-selling author. Jennifer's goal is to help you find your yay in every day. Jennifer is grateful for the opportunity to educate, empower, and inspire you with powerful conversations, insights, and new viewpoints. Here's your host, Jennifer J. Hammond.
This is Jennifer Hammond, and I'm so excited. This is one of the interviews I have been really excited to share with you because how often do you get to talk to a former Secret Service agent? And learn from her viewpoint. And yes, I said her. So if you're not watching on video, you need to know we are talking with someone who's very special and has a very interesting viewpoint because Melanie was one of the youngest female agents ever hired by the Secret Service at the age of 22. And yes, she has an amazing story. So welcome, Melanie. Yay!
Yay! Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be chatting with you today, and we'll have a good old time.
I can't wait. So it's Melanie Lentz, and I am super excited because one of the things that, I wanted to talk to you about that, sadly, so many people really do need some help on awareness and tips on self-protection, but especially real estate agents. Yes. Unfortunately, one of the worst, I'd say most painful, heart-wrenching interviews that I did in the last year was about a real estate agent who his mother was a real estate agent. They were, it was generation, and his mom was murdered.
Oh, that's terrible.
And it was awful. It was just an awful. And, we went through and recounted the whole thing, which is an extremely painful one because it was done very intentionally, how they chose her and how they decided to victimize her and torture her. It was really awful. But I think so often people just, they don't really have any training. And so they certainly don't have the awareness. So let's start there. What kind of things do people need to know for tips on self-protection?
Right. Okay. Well, the first thing to note is we want to break down protection in just the simplest of formats. And so there's kind of two types. There's a proactive protection and a reactive protection. So as a Secret Service agent, we don't just show up in the limos with our earpieces on. There's so much work that goes on behind the scenes, that proactive work. And so that is where we go in, we create a security plan, and then we execute it, and then we're reactive in the moment in case something doesn't go quite as planned. But then when we look at protection, the way that helps me kind of break it down in my daily life is you think about three things you need to think about. That first one is awareness. And situational awareness is nothing new. We know this. But as a real estate agent, you're not going to your own home where I'm aware of what cars my neighbors drive. I know what they look like. I know what grandma looks like that, picks the kids up from school. You're aware, and then you can spot something out of place. But as a real estate agent, you're popping around all over the place. You may not know the comings and goings. And so that's something where a real estate agent has to be a little more reactive and intuitive when it comes to situational awareness. So that awareness of what's going on. The second thing with protection is
before you change from there, awareness, I think also you can apply that as even when you're going to an open house or even when you're going to meet new clients, of being aware of anything that seems out of place. Or because so often as real estate agents, I'm going to be honest, we're rushing. We're like running to this appointment. We're running to that appointment. People are coming in the open house and it's more people than we expected, or people are kind of rushing by. And I think so often we don't even know what should we be looking for. So could you give an example or a story of something that as just awareness, you could notice that is out of place?
Right. And that's kind of the second thing, which is intuition. And in training, and that's the same thing is in training, we were always taught if something doesn't look right, smell right, or just doesn't seem right, and you're not sure why, there's a reason. And the worst thing you can do is be running around like a chicken with your head cut off and dismiss those inner feelings because your gut instinct is always right. I mean, how many times have we heard on the news, or how many times in your own life do you look back and go, I knew something was off about that person or that situation? And so that happened with me a lot in the Secret Service. We investigate the threats. That's part of that proactive protection. And sometimes you'd go in and a lot of times the cases weren't any good. It was some tough internet talker or what have you. But then there were some times where you go in and you say, something's off. I need to do a little bit extra. And you know, what's kind of amazing to me is how much is available to us. You know, as a real estate agent, you are popping around, you're meeting strangers constantly, potential clients, open houses. Do you know if you know you're meeting with a new client, do you know how informative Google is? How many times? Yeah. If you Google somebody and there's a news highlight, you know, maybe a violent history or something, sometimes just, yeah, you are in a rush, but that extra 2 minutes to just make yourself awareness, you know, you don't want to go into things blind if you can help it, will help you, you know, determine, hey, maybe I need a buddy or something. You know, kind of like I say, like, we don't want to live in fear. It's not about being fearful and because then you get tunnel vision. You're just so focused on the fear, you don't see what's around you. But that's why we need to be proactive. And, so I know with it's hard as a real estate agent because you don't have the luxury of controlling access. So that's kind of the third thing, that awareness, the intuition, and access control. See, I know I lock my car doors and I lock my doors and windows at night. I know that. But there's a lockbox on a lot of those houses. You don't know. I mean, everybody's hopefully is doing their due diligence, but you don't know. Or you're going into an empty house a lot of the time, not somebody that's occupying it. And so access control is the crux of protection, but probably exceptionally difficult for a real estate agent to keep in mind. So that is where I say that awareness and the intuition. And unfortunately, when we're in a rush, because I'm sure in your occupation as a real estate agent, burnout is so common and you're just so busy and I just don't have time to Google this person. I'm meeting 20 people. And so that's where I cannot emphasize enough trusting your gut and pause for 2 minutes and make yourself just a little more aware than you were going into it.
And I think when you say that, I'm going to go ahead and let's develop a little bit. Like the first one, awareness, I think is so interesting because like at an open house, you can look at the way someone is dressed and how their body motion is. And you know, you can tell if they're looking like sometimes, unfortunately, we also have a problem at open houses where people steal things. So
oh my goodness.
It could be that it's not a danger to ourselves, but they're picking up something easy, like they picked up an iPhone or they saw some cash in a bedroom drawer or something, you know, so we've seen that part of danger. Mm-hmm. But we also, so awareness could be the people who are coming into the house. How do you protect the property and the people that live there in that way? And of course, the pandemic has another layer of that, you know, and that if people are living in the house, what are the health things that you need to do? So an awareness of, you know, who's behaving in what way when you're interacting directly with them, but also who is misbehaving in one way or another, because you can observe those things. But number two, when you said intuition, that one, there's an amazing book. I don't know if you've ever read that I love. It was so many years ago, but it was Oprah who first brought it up. And I had a friend who was actually one of the stories in the book, which is why I think it probably always sticks with me. But it's called The Gift of Fear. And it's really just about intuition. And each one of the stories is very much, and I think every single real estate agent can probably, especially after like 20 plus years, I've been in for 20 plus years. And I can tell you there was definitely more than one story where I had somebody creepy. Sorry, but they were creepy and they came into the open house. And one thing that often people ask is, hey, would you come over to my house, or especially if it's a condo and they're in the building, hey, would you come over to mine and just take a look and tell me what mine is worth? Now, you have no background on this person at all. And so do you trust them? And do you go forward? And again, as real estate agents, you know, this is where we make our money. We don't make any money if we don't actually have some trust. So how do you allow your intuition to help you? And then, of course, you know, finally, the third thing you're talking about, I think it's so important that we find ways also to include others in our experience. We as real estate agents are so often all on our own. You know, like we may go out and show people places all by ourselves. Or there's so much technology. You can, we have like little timers that we can set. We can shoot our location to other people. Hey, I'm meeting so-and-so at such and such. But again, like you just said, if we haven't done the research, like gone on to Google, which I hate to say is really simple, as you said, 2 minutes and you can do it. So being able to do that, is really, really important, but also helping advise our clients of those things. So I think all three of those things are really important. Yes. So I was going to ask you if you have any other stories. We always love stories. Stories you could share with us.
Stories, yes. Well, one thing I learned, and I'm sure as a real estate agent, this is a little bit applicable as well, is that we learn early on in training to have this command presence where you kind of are taking charge and being assertive. And at 22 years old, I lacked this. I am painfully shy, and had no life experience. No. And going into training, I knew nothing, no military, no law enforcement experience. I wasn't a black belt in anything. I didn't know what I was doing. And so there was this thing early on where they were really getting on me. I looked about 16. I didn't look the part. I got punched in the face for the first time in my life that first week. I was gulp. I've got a lot to learn. But early on, they were really hard on me for not being assertive and aware and being, reacting intuitively to some of the things we needed to learn. And there was this one day where we had a test and we had to fight this, we called it a red man, but it was where this padded instructor was going to attack you and you could wail on him because he's all padded up. And you had to pass this test. And it was a scenario based kind of like, hey, you're taking your protectee to the motorcade and somebody attacks you in that vulnerable space. That movement is a vulnerable time where you have to be very reactive. Well, of course, in a scenario in my test, the protectee was going to be attacked and I was going to have to fight. And I remember walking up to the instructor when they called my name and I'm shaking in my brand new combat boots. I am so scared. And the instructor clicks his red pen and at me. And I was like, oh, he thinks I'm going to fail. Your blood boils like, I'm going to show you. So I wailed and wailed and wailed on this guy and screamed and did what I needed to do. And it was almost like a little out of body experience. And I remember when they finally called the test, said the test was over. It's like the world spins and then everything gets back to normal. And you're standing there with your, your baton and everything going, did I do it? And I looked over at my class. We're all lined up on the wall, alphabetical order, them all looking buff with their haircuts and stuff. And I look over and they're all like mouths agape, just staring at me. And I was like, I don't know if that's good or bad. And then they look over and they say, one of them winks at me and I'm like, oh, thank goodness I passed. But that was kind of a crucial moment, is that you can do more than you think. Physically, I wasn't the biggest, I wasn't the strongest. And there are some tips you learn in terms of protecting yourself that you can do without being a black belt. And so there's a couple things that I can share in that regard. And when you have weapons at your disposal, that's something that we learned. Like sometimes you don't have to have a gun or something on you to have a weapon at your disposal. And one of the biggest crucial things you can do if you're feeling uncomfortable or something doesn't seem right or somebody is coming towards you and you don't want to, is that create distance. And sometimes something as simple as a couch, which is not a weapon in and of itself, can create that distance for you to get away. There are vulnerable areas, which Redman found out very well, is that there are vulnerable areas of the body that will disable somebody very quickly. You can imagine what those are, but eyes, throat, groin area, those little things. You don't have to be a black belt to have in your head a plan. If this, then that. It's not, I play the what if game. That's a Secret Service thing. You play the what if game and nothing ever goes as 100% as planned. I locked the keys. Here's a funny story. In New York City, I had the Prime Minister of Slovakia was my protectee one year at the UN General Assembly. So this is New York City in September, very crazy time. I locked the keys in the car of her running limo. It was not my first day. And so I had to react, and I just bumped it with my hind end, bumped the door, closed it. But you know what? I never made that mistake again. I had 100 spare keys scattered about all the agents. I never did that again. But there's always room for learning, and you can always get a little bit better at it. And sometimes just little things like that extra spare key, or when you walk into a new home, you look around and say, It's not being scared. It's this what if game. It's not fear. It's if somebody were to come in here while I'm here by myself staging or doing what I need to do, setting up my flyers for this open house, what am I going to do? And one of it's like, well, there's a back door. I could run out that back door. There's a couch there. I'm going to place distance between this, island and the kitchen. There's always little things that you can be a little more aware of as you go into places. And, as you learn and you'll get better at just being intuitive about it. I walk in, okay, there. Sometimes even a snow shovel is something that can create distance, push it in front of you. I play this game all the time with myself. And if I think of it kind of lighthearted, it's like, well, if somebody comes in this restaurant, this is what I'm going to do, or this is where I'm going to go. And you kind of almost feel kind of super cool. Like I'm tougher than I think I am,
I do. I think it's like because I've dated a few special forces men who constantly play that game as well. And one of the things is, immediately going to a restaurant, what are the exits?
Yep.
Who's the most dangerous or most threatening person in the room? And I think the what if game is a super fun game because it's also an awareness game of, okay, now you're in a restaurant, close your eyes. Okay, how many people are in the restaurant? And ask three questions that, are just awareness questions. And I think that is critical for real estate agents as well. Whether you're going to an open house or going to a new neighborhood, okay, you just rushed into this open house. How many cars were on the street? What were they? Were there 5 blue ones? Was there an SUV? Was anybody in any of the cars? You could ask really quick questions like that of yourself. But one thing you said earlier, I don't want to skip over that I think is so powerful for any woman, especially anyone particularly, but I love to also really focus on women for a moment as a real estate agent or just as a woman. If you're listening to this, one of the things that I think so often is we hear something like you just said, the vulnerable, the red puffy man that you were about to attack when you're like, okay, it's time and you need to confront. I have, this is a conversation I've heard more than once is that a woman is like, well, I wouldn't be able to hurt them in their eye or in their throat or in their, crotch area. That's too much. How do you get that mind shift of, when I need it, how do I just do it? And I don't fall back and become a victim.
Mm-hmm. I think part of that is the proactive protection. And I think, they say martial arts that can be so intimidating, especially because there's so many different kinds. But there are so many communities out there that offer free weekend self-defense classes. And sometimes something as simple as that to create a little bit of that muscle memory where you're doing scenarios and role playing, even if you're maybe organize something within your real estate offices, have a seminar, somebody from a local dojo or whatever, martial arts studio, or even in a law enforcement self-defense expert, they love doing that stuff. They love coming into businesses and saying, hey, I'm going to teach you 5 self-defense moves. And we're going to practice that for about an hour. And that's going to be a muscle memory because you will fight how you practice. So if you haven't practiced, it's kind of like me. I didn't know how I was going to react when I got punched in the face for the first time. I learned I'm a fighter. I fought poorly that first time, but goodness gracious, I was fighting back. But as I got better and I practiced and we did these scenarios over and over, and you could even go into your office, practice with your colleagues, and it's this muscle memory, and it's worth the day. You're so busy as you're running around a lot. Your paycheck is based off of how busy you are and how well you do your job. But that little seminar, usually they're 3 or 4 hours max. I say be proactive. And if you're the one if you're looking at yourself and saying, I don't know what to do, I wouldn't be able to punch somebody back, then you're probably the person that would be perfect to start making some calls today and see if you can organize something, because they love doing that and it's totally worth it. Even me, before I went into the Secret Service, I kind of reverted back to those little, women-based self-defense weekend classes they had on campus for us. So it's worth it. It's part of that.
And I think
proactive with that. Yeah.
One of the things that you just said, I think is so important as well is actually going out and doing it, because sometimes we get this fixed idea in our mind and we won't blow through it until we actually go into the doingness of it. And like one of the things, even for me, because I've done some martial arts training, is I remember the very first time and I was raising my arm, in the, very advanced whatever, black belt, second degree, whatever, third degree, was saying, you can do it. And I was like, my hand is not going through a piece of wood. There is no way it's going through a piece of wood. And now you got the whole class looking at me. This is even worse. And I remember just looking at him, and he just looked at me with this intense look. And he's like, I know with 100% certainty. He was like, I know your hand moves through this like butter. And that was true. I was also worried my hand is going to hurt. So I'd rather fail at this than have my hand broken or hurting or and I had like all these, worst case scenarios going on in my head. And then I raised my hand up and I just looked at him, and his certainty, he was sure it was like a knife through warm butter. And I was like, all right. And I believed him, and I went boom. And the 2 pieces of wood went flying as I broke it in half across the room, and everybody cheered. And I was still sitting there like, what just happened? I'm like, I don't believe I just did that. And I think that's also my mindset was I can't do it. But he was so certain for me that then I went into the doing this and I did it. And then I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I can do that. So
yes, you can. Yeah.
Yay! Well, and speaking of, we're almost out of time. So I want to go ahead and ask you, because I think you do such a phenomenal job. I love your energy and your attitude. And I think it's so fun for us to look at. So how do you create yays in every day?
Well, my thing is I wake up and I tell myself every morning, what kind of person do you want to be? And I do it every morning. Sometimes I wake up on the wrong side of the bed, but I do it anyway. And when I wake up and say, I want to be a woman who exudes love every day, then I wake up and one day at a time, 1 hour at a time sometimes. But at the end of the day, when I lose track of who I want to be and what legacy I want to leave, then that's where I kind of get my downfall and burnout and such. So when I wake up, I say, you're going to exude a legacy of love today with whoever you encounter. And that's what my goal for the day is. I started out with something positive, and then yay, hopefully at the end of the day. And if I fail, we try again the next day,
and that's the thing is you just keep trying again, and you just keep creating those yays for yourself every day. Yeah. And so thank you. That was so beautiful sharing that. And thank you for all these insights on self-protection, head on a swivel, that awareness, that access control, intuition, all of those things that you shared. But now will you share, if someone wanted to learn more and read your books and follow you, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, you can reach me on my website. It's www.melanielentz.com. My book is called Agent Innocent, can be found on Amazon. It's an audiobook, Kindle, or paperback, your choice. But yes, you can reach me there. I'm also on social media at Melanie Lentz Author.
Perfect. And so as we go out, let's share our yay together. Yay!
Okay.
Hi, I'm Jack Canfield. You may know me as the co-author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. And if you want more help in getting from where you are to where you want to be, I want to encourage you to listen to the Jennifer Hammond Show.